Okie dokie, artichoke. Let's talk about Second Kings chapter 24. We're on the second to last chapter of Second Kings. This is quite a significant chapter. We'll discuss that a little bit more in our last section after our outline. But just know this is one where you're going to want to keep the details in mind, and it marks the beginning of a really significant period in the history of Judah and eventually the Jews. Timeline-wise, this one's pretty important. We're going to talk about two kings whose names are very, very similar, just to confuse you. Not only do they start with J's, but they also sound very similar. Jehoiakim and Jehoiachin. Yes, Jehoiakim reigned over Judah from approximately 609 to 597 BC. Jehoiachin reigned 597, and he only reigned for 3 months. So basically, he only reigned in 597, after which he surrendered to the Babylonians. Speaking of those Babylonians, the Empire of Babylon, which was centered around the capital of the city of Babylon, is quite significant to this chapter. Babylon was along the side of the Euphrates River, several hundred miles away from Jerusalem, which is our other main locations where the kings of Judah ruled from. Once again, our character section is made up of a bunch of kings. First of all, a guy named Nebuchadnezzar. He's the prince and later the king of the Empire of Babylon. Quite a significant guy in secular history as well. Then Jehoiakim. This is Josiah's son. Remember, Josiah was a good king. Jehoiakim, he was Josiah's son who was put on the throne of Judah by Pharaoh Necho. Jehoiachin is next, and he became king after Jehoiakim only reigned 3 months, as we mentioned. He was taken captive to Babylon, and he actually died there. Then Zedekiah, whose name was originally Mattaniah, but it was changed by Nebuchadnezzar to Zedekiah. He was put on the throne of Judah after, after Jehoiachin as kind of a puppet king. So hopefully I haven't thoroughly confused you with all of the names and the name changes. It does get quite complicated. If you need some clarity, this PDF is available. You can download it for yourself on our website for free and use it to kind of keep all these details straight. And we are still going to try to put together a timeline of all the kings to help you get your head around where they all fit in and where all the names go. So now let's talk about our outline section. In the last chapter, we talked about Pharaoh Necho of Egypt coming up into Judah and oppressing the land. They were being very heavily taxed during the days of Jehoiakim. During Jehoiakim's reign, however, a new nation comes and takes control. Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon came and took control of the land of Judah from Pharaoh. After 3 years, Jehoiakim decided that he was going to rebel against Babylon. But when he chose to rebel against Babylon, God sent other nations against Judah, including the Chaldeans, the Arameans, the Moabites, and the Ammonites. Judah wasn't going to escape oppression, and this was because this was God's judgment on Judah for the sins of Manasseh and all the evil things that he had done during his reign a couple kings ago. Jehoiakim later died, and his son Jehoiachin takes over on the throne of Judah. Verses 8 through 16 talk about Jehoiachin's reign in Judah. Jehoiachin became king when he was 18 years old. He reigned for only 3 months, and he, quote, did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. During his short reign, Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonians besieged Judah and besieged Jerusalem, and they plundered it. Jehoiachin was taken prisoner all the way away to Babylon, along with 10,000 captives from Judah. These captives included the king's family, the palace officials, the craftsmen, the blacksmiths, all the skilled workers, and the mighty men of Judah. Only the poorest of the people were allowed to stay in the land. And then finally, in verses 18 through 20, Zedekiah reigns in Judah. So Nebuchadnezzar made a guy named Mattaniah the new king in Jerusalem, but he changed his name to Zedekiah, and Zedekiah essentially becomes a puppet king under the leadership of Babylon. He reigned for 11 years, and do you think he learned any lessons from the other wicked kings before him? No, he did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. The chapter concludes by telling us that he did something pretty dumb. He rebelled against the nation of Babylon, the Empire of Babylon, and the consequences of that choice are going to be discussed in chapter 25. And as I mentioned, they're not going to be good. So that's where we'll pick up, Lord willing, tomorrow in our final chapter of 2 Kings. As I mentioned at the beginning, this is quite a significant chapter, and I think if you're just reading through and you don't kind of know the overall story of the Bible, it's easy to just read through this one, think it's another chapter about some more kings, and not recognize how significant it is. But this chapter marks a period that's quite significant in the history of Judah, and that's when they get kicked out of the Promised Land. God, back in the days of Moses, he said, if you keep my commandments, I'll let you live in this promised land. You've fought for it. You've come all the way from Egypt to get here. Obey me. You'll get to stay here. You'll be blessed. You'll receive my blessings. But if you don't obey me, I will take this land from you. Well, all these centuries later, that warning is now coming to reality. And the people of Judah are being kicked out of their land, a lot like the people of Israel already were, for their disobedience. And I think when you're thinking about the timeline of the Bible, this is definitely like one of those landmark periods of time that usually help you divide up the Old Testament. So that's why it's significant. Nebuchadnezzar's conquest of Judah and Jerusalem is very significant because it marks the beginning of 70 years of punishment that God was going to inflict on the people of Judah for the sins of Manasseh and for the sins of the other kings. The people of Judah were carried away from the Promised Land and they were taken all the way to Babylon. They would remain captives in that foreign land for several more decades. And if you know, like the book of Daniel, it takes place in Babylon. Now, that's way later in the Old Testament. Well, why is Daniel in Babylon? Well, it's because it happens during this 70-year period. They're over there in exile. Now, unlike the people of Israel who were kicked out of their land and basically scattered across the Assyrian Empire, God was going to allow the people of Judah to return home after several decades. They were only allowed to return home after Cyrus, the man who's going to defeat the Babylonian Empire, gives them permission to do it. And so again, this period of 70 years, approximately from 607 to 537 BC, is quite significant. It's one to remember, and it's often referred to as the Babylonian exile. So if you ever hear that term or anything similar to it, this is the period of time that it's talking about.